Hey everyone, welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today I have a wonderful guest for you. Her name is Connie Ellefson, and she's an engineer, professional organizer, speaker, and the author of several books. Her most recent is Clear the Space, Feel the Rush. Connie helps people release their creativity and energy by letting go of unnecessary clutter. Welcome to the podcast, Connie. I'm thrilled to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Julie. It's great to be here.
I'm excited. I talk to veterinarians and we all have like ultra busy lives. We work and we have kids and families and houses. And I know from my own experience that when my house feels really cluttered, I get anxious.
Yes.
And so when I saw that you were an organizer and you talk to people about that, I thought that was a wonderful thing to talk about on this podcast. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. I love it, especially the decluttering side. That's more what my book's about because I think that organizing is relatively easy once you have enough, you've pared down your belongings enough to where it easily fits into your space. But the decluttering is also the hardest part because we
Yeah,
don't,
because it's overwhelming, right? It
yeah.
causes overwhelm when you see big. I mean, I've been known to do that. I go into my basement and I look in my storage room and I think this place needs to be cleaned up. And then I'm like, it's too much, too much.
Exactly.
You get overwhelmed.
You just want to turn around and shut the door.
Yeah, I've done that many times. It's neat clutter, but it's still cluttered. So,
Yeah.
okay. So why don't you start by telling me in the audience a little bit about like your story? Because you're an engineer. So how
Mhm.
did you get into this decluttering space?
Yes. Well, I partly because in 2006, my work is tied to the building market, and after 9/11, it went down for several years, and I kept getting laid off, and I thought, I really enjoyed organizing my desk more than the work, so maybe I'll try professional organizing.
I love that. So it was a pandemic career change, huh?
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
awesome.
long ago. And then I've written three previous books about my interests and then of course this one because I'm a kind of an organizing book junkie. And so I could see that you could get to 90% done or you get it all done and then 3 months later it's chaos again. So I knew that there was more to it than just the perfect organizing system. There must be some mental and emotional clutter that was keeping things kind of in the way they were.
That's the
And
key to everything, right? The mental
yeah,
part of it.
I grew up moving about every 6 months to a year. My father worked for an oil company, and I lived in 18 different towns before I was 15. So our thing was travel light. And because I was always, and I actually kind of grew up with a horror of having too many possessions because I was always thinking about the next move. And then,
Oh, okay. So
but
that was anxiety producing.
yes, oh, very, yeah. So then after I left college or when I finished, I came to Denver and everything that I owned was in my car, including a bicycle and two big speakers. So that's how I started my life in Denver. And then 5 years later, I was married and we had two little boys. And we moved from a bigger house to a smaller one. And it took me and five big guys 4.5 hours to load everything into a giant moving van. So I'm like, what happened?
Yeah, how'd I go from a car to this?
So, and it wasn't it wasn't a terribly cluttered house. We just had a lot of space, and we put furniture
You
in
fill
every
it up,
room.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started downsizing from then, and I've been doing it ever since.
So is
Um,
downside, well, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt your story, but this question just popped into my mind. Is downsizing the same as decluttering, or are they two different kind of concepts?
well, they're related to each other. If you have way too much stuff for the amount of space that you live in to feel comfortable, and each person has a different level of comfort. One of the things I mentioned in my book was a study they did at UCLA where they discovered that older teenagers and men were much more comfortable or content seeing all their possessions in their visual, space, way more than the women, the moms. And I'm like,
Oh,
that's not news. But anyway,
right. Like I never thought of it, but it's fascinating. My husband likes to have all his stuff on the counter
uh-huh.
in the bathroom, and it drives me nuts.
Yes, they like to be able to see their possessions, see
That's
their domain,
interesting. Very interesting.
which could be why garages are often very cluttered. In-
Yeah.
yeah, in fact, I was speaking once at a small group of mostly older men at a breakfast, and I said, you could put all your garden tools in a big clean garbage can so they just stick out like toothbrushes, in their room. And they're like, no, no, that's not going to work. We want to see them all spread out on the wall.
Hanging on the wall. Yeah. That's
So
fascinating.
you have to come to some conclusion, or you have to work with each other to agree to have some spaces where mom is extremely comfortable and somewhere dad can be at his ease as well. And so it's always a negotiation. But for me, uh, I if I'm doing something difficult or very creative, like my engineering work is sometimes quite a lot of brain damage, and it's hard to.
There's a lot of brain work involved, right?
Yeah. So if there's a bunch of stuff in my visual field, I'm just like paralyzed. So I need to, in fact, I'm working on my office now to get it down. My dream for my whole house is that it looked like a vacation condo. And so kind of like your bedroom there, where everything is
Yes.
nicely.
Yeah, and the reason it looks like this is because I have the same philosophy as you now is okay, I don't want to buy too much because I don't want it to get too cluttered.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
I have a couple piles on my desk. So full disclosure, there's a little pile here.
right. That's why we have the cameras so we can't see everything.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, so I knew there's probably other people like me that also are hampered by having clutter in their visual field or wherever in their life. So even though my book is also about emotional clutter, mental and emotional clutter, and it's also about physical body clutter, because sometimes we've let things pile up in our bodies, whether it's arterial plaque or whatever, not maybe not eating as well as we could, or getting enough exercise. Exercise is the number one way to declutter your body. So if we haven't done that for a while, we're feeling kind of sluggish, then we really don't want to tackle that clutter because it takes too much energy to get started. So all
Right.
these things kind of tie together, I realized, with each other. They're interconnected. And so that's one of the things that if somebody's just like, oh, I can't get started on that decluttering of my stuff, they can start somewhere else. And another podcaster that I talked to said, yeah, after I go to the gym, I come home and I'm ready to tackle that junk drawer or whatever. She said, I feel much more energized. So I thought, oh, thanks for that. That's a great story because it really illustrates what I was getting at.
Yeah, I think with veterinarians, what happens with us sometimes is our job is very physical.
Yes.
And so, when you spend 9 or 10 hours on your feet, up and down off the floor, wrestling with dogs, if
Yeah.
you're a large animal vet, you're out on the farm, there's a lot of physicality in our job. And I
Right.
think what happens is with a lot of us and the people that I coach, I find this true, is that when we get home, we're so tired physically that we have a
Uh-huh.
hard time exercising. We have a hard time cleaning up. We have a hard time with that energy.
Yeah.
And so then we get even more overwhelmed by all the things that need to be done in the home, especially if it's cluttered.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
So tell me a little bit about what you think about that.
okay. Well, my thing is non-judgmental. So I could say exercise, but it's really movement. And the life you describe is way, way more than enough movement for anybody. So, number one, don't feel guilty if you're not getting to your
No
exercise.
guilt. Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually my number one tip of the whole book is first declutter the guilts.
Ah, I love that. Okay, talk a little bit about that because we have a lot of guilt. We have mom guilt, we have veterinary case guilt, we have, we're
Mhm.
behind in our cases and people are waiting guilt. We have lots of guilt.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's the gift that keeps on giving because it just piles up on itself, guilt. You can feel guilty for not having done it already, or so I kind of say, let's start fresh every day. You are incredibly busy, so give yourself a break.
Mm,
And when you have time, or if you have the ability to hire someone or get your friends to help you or your kids to help you, try to simplify your belongings, your surroundings as much as you can so that you aren't faced with a bunch of paralyzing, clutter when you come home from this extremely busy day. Basically, just give yourself a break because you're doing an incredible amount of stuff, like you said. And it's guilt is kind of a waste of time. And some of it is there's shame, and that's really more what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was just thinking that there's a lot of shame involved when you have a cluttered space.
If you if you feel guilty about something where you actually did something wrong or you didn't do something wrong and you want to make amends and it inspires you to make amends, that's sort of some good guilt. But most of us are on the useless side of shame and guilt. And nobody who does the job that you described or the life that you described should feel guilty at all.
About anything, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Yeah.
we feel guilty about feeling guilty.
Exactly.
There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff going around in our little brains that we have to work on.
Yeah, a lot of us we're kind of our culture tells us we should be able to get everything done or do everything, just manage our time right, but it's really a lot more about the energy. And one of the number one things that I learned it took me 14 years to write this book
Oh,
because
wow. That's a lot. I thought
I,
mine was slow.
I didn't have a deadline since I was self-publishing like I had on my previous three books. So that's part of it.
Mhm.
But I was so busy, I got busy again with engineering consulting. Now I work at home and I couldn't face one more hour a week on the computer. So that was part of it. But letting go of all this crap is like it's, and I'm talking about the useless guilt. We we need to be a lot more realistic about what we can actually get done in a day.
And
And
then it's all okay. Like nobody will know in a year if your dishes were clean every night.
exactly.
Like I used to race when my kids were little, they would always joke because if somebody was coming over, like my parents or company, I would like spend the whole day like running around and getting the house all cleaned up. And they were then the joke was if I was ever cleaning, they'd be like, Mom, who's coming over? And I'd be like, no one, I'm just cleaning.
That's a great line.
Yeah, it was like, oh, I think that's what a lot of us do.
Mhm. Oh yeah, it works really good. Um, the best thing I learned in those 10 years is what I call the 10-minute do nothing meditation.
Ooh, let's talk about that. I love that.
It's where you sit, and this is going to be hard for moms with kids, but you sit, you might have to do it before you leave the office. You sit and look at something interesting, maybe look out the window or something in your room. Doesn't have to be fancy, but if it's beautiful, that's nice. And you just sit there and do nothing. You're not praying, you're not meditating, you're not thinking, you're not planning, you're just sitting there getting bored with yourself. Sometimes I say, what would you like me to know? And so I just ask that question. So God or the angels or the spirit guides are going to tell you, or your higher self. And it's incredible the insights that come into your mind when you're just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah, no phone, no social media, not thinking about what you're going to do next. Yeah,
Right.
it's difficult. That is an exercise that I have been trying to do for my own anxiety,
Uh-huh.
as I find that I cover up my anxiety by doing.
Uh-huh.
And so the challenge is, can I just not do?
Right.
And it's hard. It's hard for doers.
Yeah. Sounds like you're on the right track, though. You could start with 5 minutes or even 3 minutes. It's
Yeah, but
better
I'm
than
really
nothing.
glad you talked about that because I really do think that we think that doing nothing is either wrong or that we're wasting time. Like we have all this, and it
Mhm.
really is good for your brain.
Yes, it is. I listened to a neuroscientist on TikTok, and he's always saying that it's good for your brain to take that break because you kind of accumulate what you've learned, you kind of process it and come up with some intuition. You
And that's
don't.
when the good ideas come up, huh?
Yes, exactly. Sometimes something comes in my head that reminds me that I needed to get XYZ done by a certain time and I'd forgotten about it. Sometimes that comes in. And then sometimes I just like completely look at a situation differently. And all of a sudden I feel a lot better.
Yeah. And that's
So
a good way to overcome that guilt and overwhelm too.
exactly.
It's awesome.
The other thing that I highly recommend to anybody, if they haven't already learned how to do it, is tapping.
Oh,
And
I love that. I had a couple people on the podcast that taught me tapping.
oh yeah,
So yeah, talk about that. That's a
it's
good thing.
it's really outstanding for anxiety, as that you mentioned, because it calms down your amygdala. It's like a very concrete, it's not anything hoodoo voodoo. It's just very concrete mind body, a quick, calm down, relieves anxiety because it gets you into the present. And most of our minds are going to the past, the future, the past, future, past. We're rarely in the present. So doing the tapping, it's there's lots of scientific studies about it, how it just calms you right down and kind of makes you see the silliness of all the pressures you're putting on yourself and releases them. But the main thing is it brings up endorphins. And that's in my book, that's the rush that I talk about in the title. We've all felt that rush when we declutter a closet or something, go back and look at it and say, oh, that feels good. I don't know whether it's accurate or not, but I say, oh, that's the feng shui energy that's coming, it's circling around, circling through you, making you feel better. And endorphins, right now, I actually learned to turn on the endorphins through all this tapping that I did and some other experiences that I had towards the end of writing my book that I learned how to turn it on. And it's very calming. It makes you see the humorous side of things, which is one of the best ways to relieve stress and get yourself into the present and forget about all the useless clutter in your mind.
Yeah, laughing and smiling. That's so
Mm,
good. That's so
yeah,
good for you. It calms your body down,
exactly.
brings you into the present moment. That's awesome. Yeah. So if anybody doesn't know what tapping is, you can find videos and things on the internet about how to do it. And I think I don't remember what podcast it was, but I had a couple of people on that actually went through it with me.
Uh-huh.
And we actually did it on the podcast, and that was really fun. And it does work. It's very interesting. I often forget to do it. Like I
Oh
forget it
yeah.
as a skill. I think of meditation and yoga and that, but I forget the tapping.
Uh-huh.
But it's a really interesting technique to help you calm.
There's a website called thetappingsolution.com, and
Yes.
they do a really good job of getting out information about tapping. And every year in the end of February, they have a tapping summit for a week. You can get access to about 2 or 3 hours a day of different, whatever you're interested in, different experts talking about tapping in relation to certain emotions or situations you might be going through. And then I always buy their entire package. It's like if I buy it before they start, it's like $67. And if I buy it during, it's 97. So it's pretty minimal. And then you can listen to those the rest of your life.
Oh, those are not,
So
that's nice. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. I'll have to try to remember to put that in the notes.
it's very
So
generous of them, yeah.
So talk to me, 'cause we're kind of talking about the mental aspect of it. So talk to me practically speaking, like if I came to you and I said, my house is a mess, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do. How do we get started and how do you start decluttering and organizing? Or how would you tell someone to do that?
First, I asked them to define what their dream is for their life, how they want to spend their time. And I don't just start looking at the piles or whatever. We have to get an idea because it's always an idea that inspires you to go ahead and do the work. It's not anything else. So having a dream for what you'd like I mentioned earlier, that my dream is the vacation condo mode in my
Yes.
house. That's what I aspire to. So then you can either tackle a space or like just think about what you want your whole life to be. If you got kids, but you just want to always be out doing adventures, then you might want to head towards Army barracks minimalism
So
to,
there's nothing to care for at home and then you can be
yeah,
on the adventures,
so you don't feel the guilt of
right?
going out and having a big time while your house is still a wreck. If you want to do a lot of entertaining, that might be a different layout. And sometimes I will show people a book that has lots of different decorating styles, from minimalist to extremely decorated, and ask them to page through it and see which of those appeals to them or feels comfortable. Excuse me. I didn't like that. So
That's okay.
the level of decor that they're comfortable with. And most of us, we have a little too much or even way too much. One of the feng shui principles is when you get finished with a cupboard or a closet, you leave a quarter to a third of the space open, not jam-packed.
Okay.
And that allows for more good things to come in your life, leaves like an energetic space. It may or may not be something tangible, but it also has a very practical benefit because when it's time to put stuff away, you're not trying to put it into an area that's already jam-packed, which makes you want to avoid the whole thing and drag your feet. So it really helps with that thing you were talking about where you run around and tidy up.
Yeah, that we're having company. Hurry up
Yeah,
and clean the house up. Throw everything in the back bedroom closet just to get it out of the line of sight, right?
exactly.
And that doesn't help.
So each person, each family is unique, and so we work with what their dream is and working towards that goal. And of course, all along the way, being patient with yourself and realizing that things come up where you have to put that business aside for a while. Most of us could probably, because we live in the country where it's so easy to get inexpensive goods, and maybe we can't resist a bargain. We end up with more stuff than we can comfortably hold or look at. So um, downsizing is part of decluttering,
So,
and
so you start with your dream and your vision for what you want your place or whatever to look like, even your desk, right? You could start
right.
just, I would love my desk to look like this.
Uh-huh.
And then, so you have the vision, and then you have to declutter. Is that like the second step after the dream?
Right. Yeah, you work towards it, and I would say take take whichever area of your house bugs you the most, or you could focus on your bedroom because that should be a place of serenity, and that should be a retreat, not something that makes you more nervous and makes it hard to sleep because there's always stuff going on. I don't even have a TV, but if I had one, I certainly wouldn't have one in my bedroom because that just puts a lot of electronics at your beck and call right before you're trying to go to sleep.
Right.
So yeah, just your kitchen, your bedroom. A lot of times I say maybe start with the basement or start with the garage because then you're getting out the oldest of the old crap, and there's something about stirring up the energy by pulling everything out of a space, whether it's a closet or a set of shelves in the garage, and you get to get reacquainted with all the things that you actually do have that you might have forgotten about,
Yeah.
and decide if that really suits your family anymore. I had one client that I thought had done a great job with this. They had this big pegboard in their garage with all the tools nicely arranged on the thing, but they realized that nobody does handyman stuff anymore. They just hire it.
And
So
so they have all these tools that they never use.
right. So they threw all the tools in a tub. They still had them, but they weren't taking up a bunch of space. And they had an active gardener in the family, so then they used that space to put the gardening tools up so they would be easy to access. And then they loved to go skiing and camping. So they had shelves on the other side of their garage that held all that gear right there ready to put in the car and go. So they were very focused on how they wanted to spend their time and making it super easy to access that stuff. So there's nothing holding you back from doing it.
So how do you get, so let's say you're going to do your garage,
Mhm.
because I did this recently with my husband because he likes to save everything.
Uh-huh.
So let's say you decide you're going to do your garage, you pull everything out, you start to look through things. What's the association that you get with people? And I do this with certain things too, that you're like attached to something. Like even you haven't seen it in years,
Uh-huh.
you pull it out and you say, "Oh,"
I
but you
love
have trouble letting it go because it has some sort of either emotional attachment
uh-huh.
or history or memory. Like, how do you get beyond that? Because I know a lot of the people I coach are like, I can't throw anything away because it all like it seems like it's going to be useful or meaningful or something. So how do
Uh-huh.
you coach people to do that?
There's, each person has a different reason for holding on to stuff. So I'd probably talk with them and see what their reason is. Sometimes we spend a bunch of money on something, so we don't want to throw it away and admit how dumb
Because
we
it's
were to
worth
spend
something, right?
it.
It's worth money.
Yes. So someone recently on TikTok even said, well, just think of it as sunk costs, or you learned a lesson, and we're often paying money for classes or coaching. We're often paying money for education. So just call that was a lesson. That was my education. I'm going to let go of it. Maybe sell it or whatever if they really can. Um, and then when it comes to something that you have an emotional attachment to, like a tool that your grandpa gave you or something, one of the best things is just to like miniaturize or say you got 4 or 5 items that are very that really speak to you emotionally. What's the one that's your most favorite? Like there's a flood coming in an hour and you have help to get the most important things out of your house. Would you take all those things or would you just take one thing? What's the one
I love
thing you would
that.
take?
Yeah, what's the most important memory thing that you want to keep?
Right.
Yeah.
In whatever category it is, whether it's memory or I've spent a bunch of money on it or I used to use it, but I don't really use it anymore. Whatever. If you put that thing on one side and then you look at all the others, it works the same with books too. If you have 5 books and you look at which are your 2 favorites or your 3 favorites, put them on one side and then the others, they're kind of like, you look at them and you feel less of an energetic connection, less of just a connection to it. So then it's easier to let go of that if you want to like downsize 30% or 40%, then it's just a numbers game. And that can appeal to people that like to do numbers or engineers or guys or whatever. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, you just come up with a different strategy for each person. I had one family that, like, I think like you, they had lots of nice stuff in the basement, but it was pretty cluttered, disorganized. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting it back on the shelf and maximizing the use of the space because it's become disorganized, but there really isn't that much stuff. It's just all over the place.
Right. It's been pulled out and not put
Yeah,
away or whatever. Yeah.
right. You can start with that, especially if you have such a hard time letting go. But anyway, when we got done we did get rid of some stuff out of their basement, and then they had lots of nice shelving, so we got it put back on the shelves in an easier to access way. And their 10-year-old son said, "Mom, now we can play down here." And just the joy in his voice was that just made the whole thing worthwhile. And it's, just look at your bigger life picture in general. It's usually the relationships that matter. It's not the thing.
Not the stuff.
Yeah. So sometimes you just have to latch on to some story that really grips you emotionally. I have a friend whose mom was always all about, these are the family heirlooms. These are the family antiques. You need to take really good care of them, and they're very important.
Yes.
And so she infused her daughter with this thought all her life. And then on her deathbed, she said, you know, they really don't matter at all. It's the people, it's the relationships. So her daughter's going, thanks, mom. No, I got
Now
this,
she
I
has a
got this.
lifelong guilt of saving everything, right?
Right. Yeah. So just some inspiring story that helps you stay on track or keeps you going. And
Yeah.
realize it's a process and it does take time because, like you said, you are very busy. I'm currently single and my kids are grown and I work at home. I don't have to commute. I don't have to blah blah blah, and I don't have a lot of stuff. But still, I run out of time to keep everything tidy too.
Yeah,
So,
you get overwhelmed. I mean, it's very easy. It's easy to get a sink full of dishes, and
mhm.
that can be overwhelming. It's easy to get a pile, of papers, which is kind of a little bit what I have right here. It's like, oh, this is the stuff I need to do. So
Uh-huh.
there's a pile, and it's neat.
Yeah.
But at some point it becomes overwhelming because it keeps stacking up. It used to happen at work when we had paper records, which was a long time ago. Now they're on the computer,
Uh-huh.
but it's still a stacking up of I have to do things that
Right.
causes that overwhelm and that, it's almost like getting paralyzed in fear
Hmm.
that, you can't handle it. It's just
Exactly.
like the thought. Yeah.
What I
So, oh, go ahead.
what I do with my work, my engineering, sometimes it's hard to start the work and sometimes it's easy, but I'll work for half an hour, I'll set a timer, and then I'll spend 10 minutes taking a break. And sometimes I'll say, okay, I'm going to put away 20 things during this 10 minutes and get a drink or get a cup of coffee or something. And then I could go back to work. So I'm working at home and I'm surrounded by things that might need to get done, but I'm working on it in little bits of time. And so I do actually make progress over the day and it gives me a nice break. Sometimes I just flop down on the floor and read for 10 minutes. So whatever it takes for your individual person, because you're all brilliant.
They
You,
definitely are. Veterinarians are very smart people. And I think sometimes it works to their detriment
Mhm.
because they are so perfectionistic, they are so motivated, they are so goal oriented
Uh-huh.
that the clutter, and that's why I was excited to have you on the show, is the clutter just really bothers them and seems to be kind of a
Hmm.
sticking point almost.
Yeah.
I thought of this question while you were talking, so I'm going to ask you and see what you think. If you're one of those people that is feeling stuck and overwhelmed about whatever decluttering you want to do or organizing you want to do, does it help to have a coach or someone? I've coached people through their own clutter in their homes, but does it help to have someone come in with you, like into your home and help you, or a friend even, and
Oh
say,
yeah.
look, I really need to clean this closet, but I can't do it. I'm too overwhelmed,
Hmm.
and be a little bit more objective. I know when we were cleaning our garage, I'm much more objective about all the junk than my husband was
Yeah.
because he gets attached and I'd be like, really, really, do we have to keep this? And I like challenge his thinking, would that help someone that was really struggling, do you think?
Oh yeah, that's huge. Part of what organizers do is they listen to people's stories about the stuff. And when someone listens empathically or empathetically, then it's easier to let go of it because you're kind of letting go of a part of yourself. And
Yes.
so when somebody acknowledges that you're an important human being, you exist, and what you've done is important, then it's easier to let go of it. And so yeah, it helps a lot. Like I have another friend who's an organizer. She came in one day to help me with my office, and she pointed out several things that I could do that might make it simpler. And I'm like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. And I've got all kinds of ideas and the background that helps me want to keep it simplified. But yes, it helps a ton to have either a friend. I'd say because I don't like being challenged that much, but I'd say a friendly friend, not one who's going to say, "Well, I wouldn't keep that crap," because so why are you
Well,
keeping it?
or you could hire somebody that's not emotionally involved with you at all.
Exactly.
Like I
Yeah.
would think in my house, if I invited a good friend in, that would be more difficult for me than if I
Uh-huh.
invited, say, you in that I've just met,
Right.
and I would feel less threatened by that
Uh-huh.
relationship trying to
Exactly.
clean up than I would with one of my best friends. So I think it's an
Right.
individual thing. Like if you're really comfortable with your best friend challenging you, you're thinking. The other thing I thought of as you were talking and talking about getting rid of things that were emotional to you, I found myself in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years taking photograph of things that I'm getting rid of.
Exactly.
So if I have like
Uh-huh.
a picture, like I don't know, a painting or a piece of something that I'm a little bit attached to and I'm having trouble letting it go, I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, well, I'm just going to take a picture of this so I can remember it, and then I'm going to get rid of, then I'm going to put it in the donation pile or whatever. And that's kind of helped me let go of some things because I can still see it and know that it existed, but I no longer have it piling around my house.
Exactly. Yeah,
Is
that's
that
a
something
wonderful
that people
solution.
can
And
do?
yeah, it's a great idea. That's the ultimate in miniaturization.
Well, Well, I think that's when you said it, I thought of it. I'm like, what if you took a picture? Because
Uh-huh.
there are some things that I'm like, oh, I really don't like a puzzle. Like I'll make a puzzle and then you're like, oh, I don't want to get rid of this because I just spent all this time building it.
Uh-huh.
So I started this at work. We used to build puzzles. I would say, well, let's just take a photograph of it and
Uh-huh.
then we can crumble it up and give it to
Right.
someone else. But we
Yeah.
have proof that it existed
Uh-huh.
and that we
Yep.
spent time doing it. Yeah.
It's cool that you let yourself accept that. Because some people wouldn't, they'd say, well, photograph is not the same thing. But yeah, if that works for you, that's outstanding. That's
Well,
wonderful.
you have that, you still have the memory, but you don't have to keep the thing,
Uh-huh.
you
Oh
know?
yeah, that's always the case. Yeah.
Yeah. I maybe because I'm a scrapbooker, I love scrapbooking, and that's another problem because then you have all these scrapbooks laying around your house. My kids would say, "Mom, what are you going to do with all these scrapbooks?" I'm like, "I don't know, give them to you, I guess, and then you guys could throw them away." But
Well,
yeah,
that's okay
yeah,
because it's a relief. It's a release for you to do the scrapbooking. It's something different than your practice was, and it's okay. I mean, it's okay to have some hobbies, even hobbies that take up space. The main thing is, are you getting rid of all the non-essential stuff in your environment so that you can actually focus on these things that make life more fun?
yes,
That's a perfect way to focus your energy and say, I want to feel like I can any old time I want to go spend half an hour on my scrapbooking. I don't have to feel guilty because the kitchen's a mess or whatever.
right.
It's hard to keep up with it. We have to always keep in mind the maintenance cost of everything that we buy
Mm,
because it isn't just looking at it and enjoying it, it's keeping it clean, keeping it safe. One of my favorite stories was about a woman in New York who was very wealthy. She had a very nice apartment, and some people broke in one day and stole all her jewels and her furs and her, point, whatever she had collected. They took it all, and she
wow,
wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times, publicly thanking these burglars for taking away all her stuff because she realized how much energy she'd been putting into acquiring them, insuring them, protecting them with a security system, which didn't work in this case, whatever. She's like, oh, I feel so free.
isn't that something?
So a thing like that inspires me. And I always like to think, what if I won the lottery? And for some reason I had to stay in the same house I'm in. I just had to stay there. Would
Right,
I keep all this stuff that's floating around knowing I could easily replace it if I really needed it, or wouldn't I?
right. Yeah,
So
that's a fascinating thought exercise, isn't it?
yeah. And it's more fun than just, dang, this place is a wreck. I need to get rid of everything. It's a fun way to change your thinking about stuff.
Yeah, or it means something about you. I think the thing that I hear a lot is the judgment that comes from th there's something wrong with me because my house isn't organized, or there's something wrong with me because I can't clean this closet or whatever it is. And I
Right.
just tell people, I'm like, no, it's just your thinking. So we have to work on your thinking,
Hmm.
which will open it up. I worked with somebody one time that had moved to an apartment and they hadn't unpacked the boxes in a year.
Uh-huh.
And so it wasn't the boxes, they were overwhelmed, but it was also their thoughts that were underneath that of why they couldn't settle in.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion wrapped around things, I think. Is
Oh,
that what
exactly.
you find in your when
Yeah,
you're writing your book?
it's huge.
Yeah.
It's
You have
huge.
to clean up the emotions.
And it's okay to leave. See, the thing is when you got kids, especially you got young kids around, and it just seems so chaotic. Well, that's part of the deal. It's it's
That's
gonna
the
be,
fun of it, right? From
yeah,
somebody whose kids are grown. Like both of our kids are grown, and half of the fun it was the chaos.
yeah. So
Looking back, you
so
kind of miss.
always, yeah, give yourself credit and definitely take away whenever you can take away the judgment, that's good. And because the judgment can keep you from moving forward too. It's the shame and the judgment is like what holds you back. So
And in so many areas of your life, right?
yep.
Yeah. Whenever you're trying to accomplish anything, there's a lot of judgment, self-judgment.
Mhm. Well,
So what? Oh, go ahead.
our lives can be very complicated, not just with raising kids, the practice, trying to eat right, getting stuff ready for your accountant. I mean, it's ginormous. So anytime you can give yourself credit, give yourself a break, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, and prioritize the things that you have to do versus the things that you're worried about that are causing shame.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I love the idea of involving the family. If you have little kids and you're like, all right, we're going to clean the toy room and we're going to get rid of 10 things today and we're going
Hmm.
to donate them to some other little kids that need them or something like that, just kind of getting it to be an activity maybe
Right.
would be
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, they love having mom and dad involved and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
So what have we not talked about that we should before we have to get done here? Is there something I
Oops.
haven't asked you that I should have?
Well, mainly that the time that it takes to organize and declutter is worth it many times over. And like you said, sometimes it's hard to get started or it's hard to fit it into the schedule, but it's really rewarding. The hardest part is getting started. And
Hmm.
so I often tell people, and it makes sense, you start with things that you're less emotionally attached to that, kind of mean nothing to you. You got to get your muscle going of decluttering and downsizing that section of your life. And then you move on to the stuff that's a little more difficult to let go because you're already feels good. You're already in the mode. One of the most interesting things that I learned as I was writing this book at the very end, I was mentioning the endorphins. I was I was in a this was during the lockdown, the pandemic. I was lying outside on a yoga class at my athletic club. Look, we're doing the shavasana, the pose at the end where you just lie on your back.
My favorite one.
Yes, mine too. Like, can we
I
do this
love.
the whole
So when
time?
we get to that, I'm like, oh yes, this is great.
Yes. So I'm looking up into the dappled leaves. The sunshine it was like a beautiful oak tree or whatever, gorgeous leaves. And then the instructor's voice was very soothing and the music was soothing. And I'm just like, oh, I feel so good. Shavasana. And all of a sudden I went, wait a minute. It's not that stuff that's releasing the endorphins in my body. It's me. I'm the one that's letting the endorphins go. It's not the music, it's not the leaves, it's not the instructor, it's me.
Yes.
That's when the penny dropped that I could learn to turn that on anytime. And doing tapping is a great way to do it, but
Yes.
simply lightening up and letting go and looking at the funny side of things where you start laughing or whatever, even if you're doing it in your mind.
Yes.
You can't do it
Yeah.
in the middle of your
Uh,
business meeting.
Speaking about the funny part of it, one of the things that I've challenged some of my clients to do that are worried about their cleaning up their house is
Uh-huh.
to start with their underwear drawer.
Ah,
Because that's quick. Like you can organize your underwear drawer or your sock drawer. You
uh-huh.
could do that in maybe 10 minutes. So set your
Uh-huh.
timer, throw out all the old stuff that you never wear, get rid of the ones with holes in them, make it
Yeah,
neat. And then that will kind of inspire you to go on to whatever the one is that's driving you crazy.
exactly.
Start with something small
Uh-huh.
that you can tackle and win over.
Right. And when I say taking everything out of a space, it's hard to do that for a whole room. It
Yes.
it's probably ideal, but it's hard because you may not have enough hours to process everything and get it back. But so then I guess you would do a small area. Lots of organizers, including Marie Kondo, suggest getting everything of a category together from all over your house, all the books
Oh,
in one pile, all the clothes, just one category at a time. And then
right.
you can really see which ones do I really love and which ones are just kind of hanging on. Again, it's another way of sorting out the loved items and the stuff that's just taking up space that you don't use or enjoy. So yeah, there's so many different ways to approach it, but starting small is always good because then every time you go look at that drawer, you go, oh, you can feel the endorphins again.
Well, and you have to look at that one every day, right? Because you're
Yes.
constantly putting on clean underwear and clean socks.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
that's why I kind of like that. Or your desk. I like organizing the desk.
Uh-huh.
It's at work. I think for people that work, getting your desk neat helps
Right.
you feel more focused. So I
Uh-huh.
love all this. I love this stuff. Okay, so tell me, give me a couple of like top tips for people that are listening to us and they're like, okay, what one thing can I do this week or what two things can I do this week to feel better about being decluttering and organizing?
you could, if you haven't done it yet, you could just sit down and just with either with yourself or your family, decide what you guys want your life to be like,
Mm,
basically how you want to spend your time.
I love that.
I had one client who said, every Saturday, I think I'd like to go for a bike ride or check out a museum, but then I think I should do something with those boxes in the guest room that have been there since we moved last, and then I end up not doing either of them because I
Right.
just stagnate.
Because you're avoiding. Yeah.
And I said, "How long since you moved?" And she goes, 10 years. So if it's really important to you to have everything cleaned up, then so that you can go ride the bike or whatever, then that's your number one priority is getting that log jam out of the way. And
Right.
and like you said, tackling something small. I just think that learning how to do tapping, or even if you just do the 10-minute do nothing meditation, and you don't try to direct your thoughts, but you could say, what should I know about my house organizing project? You give yourself that question before you start. You don't necessarily focus on it while you're meditating, while you're looking out the window getting bored. You just throw it out there and let your intuition bring it to you.
Yeah.
So
And you'll be less anxious and less overwhelmed if you can
exactly.
get your brain in a calmer state.
Mhm.
Because
I
you
think
can't do anything with anxiety and overwhelm.
right,
You're not gonna tackle anything, even the underwear drawer, right?
exactly.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
and realize that any step that you take, even if you didn't get to any step that week, but any step forward is a good one in the right direction
It's
to help you have a
progress.
less cluttered life.
That's awesome. Great. Well, tell anybody out there where they can find you, where they can find your book, if they want to know more about what you do or they want to read your book.
Okay. Well, my website is clearthespace.com. That's CLEARTHESPACE.com. I've got quite a few videos on TikTok, a few on YouTube, and that's the main thing. Instagram I'm on as well. But so the website has information, contact information. Connie at clearthespace.com is my email, if anybody cares. But and the book's available as an ebook, a paperback, a hardback, and an audio version.
So you don't have to clutter up your house if you just buy
Right.
the ebook.
Yeah.
I like books. I like to hold on to them, but
Yeah.
they can, if once you read them, if you can't like pass them on, they can be cluttering, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I've kind of decided I'm going to look at my books and say, if I needed a book to read tonight, would I pick that one up? And if the
That's a good
answer day
question.
after day after day is no, it's probably in your past. So if you,
You no longer need it.
yeah, that even goes to books you haven't read yet that you think you want to read.
Truth. Yeah. Or books that you started and then you quit reading because you're not that interested.
Mhm. Yeah,
I have a hard time not finishing a book once I start it, but some of them
right.
I'm like, why am I reading this? I don't like it.
Exactly, exactly. So that's bookshop.org has, I believe, the hardcover and the paperback version on it. And that's a nice way to support independent booksellers is to order a book through bookshop.org.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's available on the big name platforms.
Right, right. Okay. Well, I appreciate you being with me.
Oh, thank you so
Anything
much,
else we want
Julie.
to say?
No, I think
I'm
that
definitely going to keep in touch because I
okay.
need somebody that knows how to organize, especially for some of my clients, because I can do some of it and I'm a pretty organized person, but we
Mhm.
all get bogged down
Exactly.
in stuff and clutter.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it
And
sounds like
buying stuff.
you've you've done a good job of developing your coaching, so I probably need to talk with you as well.
There we go. Yeah, we'll keep this relationship going.
Great. Thanks, Julie.
All right. Well, everybody check out Connie. And if you're feeling cluttered this week, go clean something up, even if it's something small. Organize your desk and then let us know how it feels. You can email either one of us and let us know what you did this week. That's our challenge, right?
Great.
All right. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye. Bye, Connie.
Bye-bye.